Hello, I'm Dr. Lotta Ryslitsky for the Kyiv Post, and we have a very special guest today with us, Ms. Olyana Gordiyenko. She is a top female lawyer in Ukraine with a very long history with reforms, having worked with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. And today she's here speaking with us in the capacity of the head of the Supervisory Board of Ukraine's Import and Export Bank, Ukreximbank. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of movements happening in Ukraine with the war and changes, reforms. Your position is extremely important because you're representing on that board, basically, you're securing Ukrainian taxpayers' money. Ukraine's banking laws and regulations oblige the Supervisory Board to ensure, and I will read it, to ensure the functioning and control the effectiveness of comprehensive and adequate internal control systems of the bank, including the risk management system. That's quite a large responsibility you have. It must be kind of hard at times.
We enjoy it.
It's important to enjoy your work.
Yeah.
2021 was a record-breaking year for the bank. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was actually. And the Supervisory Board of the Ukreximbank was appointed in 2019. It was actually the first time the bank had a Supervisory Board. The reason the Supervisory Board was elected was to transform the bank. And 2021 was the first year when the bank was actually profitable, which I think is a big achievement of the management team. Because as you said, the Supervisory Board is only to sort of control the effectiveness of the management board and ensure that the management board is sort of complying with the, all the regulations. So in fact, the result of the 2021 showed that the state-owned bank, with all the legacy we have, nevertheless can be profitable.
And you were a member of the board in 2019, and then you became the head of the chair lady of the board in 2020. 2021, we see a rise and an improvement with the operations of the bank. Then 2022 happened. What were the key successes that you had in 2022, and what were the worst things that happened with you?
Yeah, the worst thing that happened was the escalation of the war. I mean, that's you can't underestimate that, but at the same time, it's not fair to sort of blame everything on the war, right? The best thing which happened in 2022 was that the bank sustained. All the employees of the bank are safe, that the team is stable and the bank is operational. Everyone in Ukraine had the same situation, and I'm proud to say that the Supervisory Board, the Management Board, all the bank employees, including in the regions, continued to operate. The management of the bank ensured the safety of the employees, which was the sort of a key task in the beginning of the escalation of the Russian invasion. The biggest thing I think I'm proud of is that the financial result of the bank for 2022 is its losses, yes, but the losses are based on the bank provisioning for the potential losses of the war. So it's not an operational loss, if you will. And to prove that, the first quarter of 2023, the bank has an operational profit which already exceeds the estimate for the entire year of 2023. I understand all the sort of nuances and the publicity around the bank, etc., but the management is really doing their job. Supervisory Board supports whatever the management is doing, and I think it's very illustrative, right?
How do you explain that?
The management works 24/7. Whatever, I mean, again, the speculations are, but they are really doing their job.
That must be really difficult considering we have the sirens going off on a regular basis and you have the added need for security.
They really care about the bank. They try to change it. There are a lot of challenges. The challenges regulatory. Obviously, it's not easy because it's difficult to calculate the losses, the clients, whatever, to estimate how all the borrowers will perform, because there are a lot of uncertainties. But they are doing their best.
Your risk management charts must be out of this
exactly
out of this world.
Exactly.
2022 was also a little bit of a difficult year because you had some internal shifts and a new positioning inside of the management of the bank. I would like to talk about that later, but before I do, I think it's very important to understand that the role of the Supervisory Board in Ukraine is perhaps even more important than you would have it in the United States, because of the, let's say, high levels of risks and corruption on top of it. Would you tell us how were you selected and appointed? What is the process of board members being selected and appointed? And is it the same for all banks, or is it just for state-owned banks? It's very interesting to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, no, it's different for state-owned banks. For state-owned banks, there is a nomination committee at the level of the Cabinet of Ministers, who is the shareholder of all the state-owned banks. The representatives of EBRD, IFC and other IFIs are present at the meetings of the nomination committee. You have the representative of the Office of the President, the Parliament, and the Ministry of Finance. And this nomination committee engages sort of a professional recruiting agency, which selects a long list, and then the long list is getting reviewed by the nomination committee, and the nomination committee selects a short list, gets the interviews. And then the difference between the state-owned banks and the state-owned companies is that the state-owned companies, they get appointed after they get the interviews. With the state-owned banks, the difference is that the national bank needs to sign off. Therefore, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but recently there were two competitions for the Privatbank and for Ukreximbank, yes. And the approach was a bit different. For Privatbank, the nomination committee selected the new supervisory board, and then there was a time gap between the decision of the government and the time when the new supervisory board was actually signed off by the National Bank. What the National Bank is doing, the central bank, is actually the check on whether or not the members of the new members of the supervisory board complies with the requirements for the qualification requirements for the banks. So they do the test and the interviews, and they test the sort of competences, let's put it this way. For Ukreximbank, the process was a bit different. The government said that we appoint the new supervisory board from the time they get approved by the National Bank, to make sure there is no time gap.
So is this because of an extra check and balance, or how would you explain this lack of harmonization basically between the approaches?
Difficult for me to say. The government has an option to do it this way or that way, and I guess they sort of just make their choice. I don't know why.
It's not regulated, or
no, it's not. It's not. I mean, they can do it this way or that way, and.
Do you think it should be a little bit more?
I think it should be. I think it's important, especially during the wartime, if I may. I think that definitely the government and the central bank need to be concerned about the continuity.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, also about the continuity. How long? What is your term? Can you be appointed forever, or?
No, it's 3 years. The law on state banks says that it's a 3-year mandate. The mandate of the supervisory board of Ukreximbank ended, you can't believe it, in June last year. The law also says...
I'm sorry, it ended in June of
June.
last year.
Of last year.
And now what do we have?
The competition is ongoing. We still wait for the interviews to be scheduled. The law says that at the government discretion, all the supervisory boards of all the state-owned banks could have been prolonged without the competition. Of course, it's a big discretion for the government to
It's
say.
a large,
Yes,
huge
I understand. Therefore, the competitions were called. It would be nice, obviously, if the competitions would be held a bit earlier, but there were a lot of reasons for delays, like, the IMF, the mission, a lot of reasons why. But the law also says that until the new board is appointed, the old board continues. Therefore, despite that our contracts ended in June, the current composition of the supervisory board continues until the competition is over.
Because we do have with Ukreximbank a shift and a new chairman of the management board. And he is now going to be in that position until the end of martial law. And it's clear that Ukraine has not fallen within 3 weeks. And it is looking that we will have a very long and protracted war, which means martial law. How does that impact the checks and balances of the oversight, basically, of the bank? And how does that affect your responsibilities?
You know that when the escalation of the invasion sort of started, we had a competition for the position of the sort of a CEO. The reason we didn't continue with the competition is because that was a bit weird. We had final interviews scheduled for 24th of February. And the supervisory board obviously agreed that we are not going to have interviews on the 24th of February. For obvious reasons.
Yes, reasonable choice.
Serhiy, who was acting CEO at the time when the whole sort of thing happened, he was with the bank since 2020. But at the time when the war started, it was obvious and unanimous decision for the supervisory board to appoint him as a CEO for a number of reasons.
Appointing him for CEO, if I may interject just for a second, it's interesting to learn about this the length. Why did you play a role in deciding that his appointment will be as long as there is martial law in Ukraine?
Of course. The rationale for that was that we meant to have a transparent competition, which was not possible due to the events. But as soon as the martial law ends, and obviously at that time we thought...
This could take years, this could take decades.
Yeah, but at that time we thought it will not take that long. The idea was that until the events are uncertain and turbulent, we need to have certain stability.
Do you not think that...
We may reconsider that, or the new supervisory board elected by the government may reconsider that.
Would you like to tell me a little bit about this event that happened that a little bit marred the view of your bank in the eyes of Ukrainians? Or would you rather not discuss that?
No, I'm open to discuss whatever you think that would be interesting.
I think it's important that people receive your perspective and your vision of what happened and what the lessons learned and how...
In terms of the bank?
Yes.
In terms of...
Resignation or basically your board ended up kicking out the former...
Well, that's not exactly this way. He resigned. It took him some time, but he resigned. The role Yevhen played in the result of 2021 is actually significant. If not for him, the bank would not achieve the sort of a tremendous result the bank achieved. He was, in terms of the bank, he still is, but
yes.
Yeah. he was a visionary, and if not for him, the bank would not achieve what the bank achieved. Okay. It is unfortunate what happened sort of in October 2021. And as far as I understand, at least, obviously, Yevhen took his lessons, let's put it this way.
Some reforms have been halted because of the war. Has that impacted your reform or approach to reform? It's great, like training and all of this is a part of it. How are you experiencing
the
that?
corporate governance reform, you mean? Well, I can tell about the banks, the sort of our bank. I don't think that the war impacted, or the escalation of the war impacted the sort of attitude to the reform from the government or the office of the president. I do think that they concentrate less on that, obviously. For obvious reasons, they have sort of things, more important things on the agenda, but at the same time, maybe it's a good thing that we don't sort of get as much attention from the government and the administration, but the reform, what is the, I mean, after the law has been adopted and the supervisory board has been appointed, what is the reform? The reform is the daily job of the supervisory board and the management and the people in the bank, sort of continuing to implement the whole sort of idea behind the reform. We still do it, right?
And are there other economic reforms that you're feeling have been halted or impacting the operations of the bank, or are you guys basically good?
I mean, less attention to corporate governance reform.
And so while certain reforms in Ukraine have come to a complete halt, because they may require some changes to the constitution, which happens, unfortunately, a lot, more often in Ukraine than in other countries. One of the things that halted a little bit, but is now starting to be put back into life, is privatization. And the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Shmyhal, had announced, I believe it was on the 23rd or end of March, that the privatization process is going to start. Many people think it's a very strange thing to be doing in time of war, where oversight and control and transparency are already threatened because we have that martial law in place and certain media restrictions in place. The privatization process is not only to Ukraine's land and buildings, real estate, it also is related to banks. And if I'm not mistaken, there are 3 national banks in Ukraine, or state-owned 4. There's your bank, obviously.
Privat, Oshad, and Ukrgas.
And how are they doing with this privatization? Because we hear some information that they stand to potentially be privatized, and maybe Ukreximbank will be the last one standing.
Yeah. Privat bank was not supposed to be state-owned bank. Right. That's sort of the history, you know, sort of.
It's just for a movie.
Oshad Bank historically is a state-owned bank in many countries, by the way, not only in Ukraine. I mean, but obviously there is a plan to privatize it as well, and you know that EBRD was supposed to step in, you know, at least as a minority shareholder, but you know, for obvious reasons, it's on hold. Ukrgas Bank is a bank which, you know, obviously, I think you are right to say that Ukreximbank would be the last bank to privatize, if ever, for obvious reasons. In many countries, the import-export banks are state-owned banks. We fund the defense sector, which is probably, which will take some time to sort of open up. But we do have, at least before the war escalated.
Actually, that's one of the reforms that has been halted, is this transparency of the state defense order.
But I'm hoping, and I'm sure that you will also sort of want to have it happen, that you heard recently there was a decision to corporatize Ukroboronprom. We're all very happy that hopefully that will happen, because during the sort of a reform of state-owned enterprises and the state-owned enterprises law, Ukroboronprom was carved out during the President Poroshenko's time. So it's a good news, right? That now it will hopefully launch. And,
Olyana, we were just mentioning that the Ukreximbank may become the only state-owned bank left in Ukraine. And as history shows, war impacts incomes of nations and of states. The first national bank in the United States was actually created after the Revolutionary War, so in the 1700s. And it was done so in order to gain money for the state, because it was basically on the brinks of being broke as a result of the war. Today, what role do you see in your bank that you're representing in securing Ukraine's financial recovery?
Yeah, I mean, again, subject to the competition and the selection of the new board, and we don't know sort of how it will end, obviously, but if you ask me, I think the Ukreximbank is the excellent platform for sort of a channeling the whole sort of a process of recovery of Ukraine. The Ukreximbank has proven to be the excellent partner for IFIs and international donors to sort of channel the funds to Ukrainian economy. Ukreximbank has been proven to be an excellent agent of the government in sort of also channeling the funds. Ukreximbank has the best variety of products, banking products, for the private business and communal enterprises in the regions of Ukraine to actually sort of boost the economy post-war or at the end sort of whatever events.
We're talking about potentially trillions of dollars. If you look at the damage that has been caused and continues to be caused, we have no idea what Ukraine will
when it
look
will
like.
end. Exactly.
Right. So that it's incredibly important that the Supervisory Board have clear, perfectly working checks and balances and a high level of transparency, because it's going to be money that is going to be building Ukraine's future. Do you have already a sort of plan or a vision for the bank's activities in this regard?
Yeah, we do. We do. But I mean, we are supervisory board, and our authorities ended in June. We are now waiting for the new competition, so we'll see. But I think the sort of the bank with this supervisory board or with the new supervisory board, and we do try to prepare the bank for the transition.
And the sort of, I mean, you stand potentially being usurped under an authoritarian.
Yeah, we do, we
system.
do. But I do believe that the bank has the systems and the sort of controls necessary to survive even the change of the supervisory board. And the bank and the management and the sort of internal auditor, the compliance officer, the sort of a chief risk officer, I do think they have a vision and they have an understanding of how this Ukreximbank can play a role in the recovery of Ukraine. And obviously the recovery of Ukraine, it's not only about the donor funds or, you know, sort of it's a lot about the private sector.
Yes.
And I'm proud to say that the Ukreximbank, whatever, again, speculations are, but we do serve a lot of sort of a local business in municipalities, in regions of Ukraine. So we have the biggest chain of products to offer, you know, for the local businesses, for the municipalities. And it just, the question is probably more about PR and marketing.
You mentioned that the management is doing a really good job, but that you've implemented a plan, a special plan how to operate during times of war. Are you hiring many more people because you're operating in extenuating circumstances.
The other way around, actually. The reason why the supervisory board was hired in the first place is to make sure that the bank sort of starts to operate more efficiently. So digitalization was a big part of this sort of on the agenda.
Well, there's always room
Yeah,
for improvement.
and but the good news is that we know where
Yes.
what to do. We have a clear plan, and
Well, that's very important because you're also offering business to foreign businesses, investors, donors. So it's something that definitely requires communication and transparency and integrity. One of the things that I was wondering is we're also seeing a lot of Russian oligarchs and Russian sanctioned property all over the world being seized. And some people are really pushing, and I'm a supporter of this, that the money from the Russians, who are directly related to what is in effect genocide against the Ukrainian state and nation, be put into Ukraine. So take the Russian money and put it into Ukraine to also rebuild it. Does Ukreximbank stand in a position where you may eventually be the bank that receives this type of realigned funding?
there is a sort of a pool of money frozen or sort of in the bank, but it's not as significant as sort of I thought it would be, let's put it this way. And there are a lot of legal issues in sort of unfreezing these funds you mentioned, not only in Ukraine in the bank, but in general worldwide.
Well, Canada is a great example of this redistributing the sanctioned assets. And I understand that certain national changes to legislation need to be made by the countries who have seized and have them bring the money to Ukraine. I hope that that will be done. And if your bank is operating and
is a platform, yes. Obviously, we can process that, and Ukraine has the laws on the sort of mandatory confiscation, примусове вилучення of the sort of Russian sort of assets. The legislation is very new, obviously, 2022, but we know examples of this legislation being already implemented, and hopefully, obviously, nobody will challenge that. Yeah, I mean, as you said, logically, this is how it should be, right? And I understand that in many countries there is a sort of a concern about the sort of private property and proprietary sort of interests of. But I know that worldwide, everyone is working to make sure this is resolved.
Yes, and you're also working, I believe, on reconstruction plans. Do you have projects in the pipeline, specific ones already, or are you still in
we do. There are a lot of discussions in Ukraine on creating new institutions for the reconstruction and sort of and we have recently discussed with sort of a number of ministries that at least Ukreximbank thinks that instead of wasting time on creating new institutions, which does take time and obviously has a this time lag on sort of until the institution matures enough to be able to operate, Ukreximbank is a sort of a good platform and to be used, as you said, in the reconstruction. We have products, we have systems, and
So what can you offer the foreign interest or customers interested in working with Ukraine right now, this year?
We have been working with the IFIs on channeling the funds to the private sector of Ukraine for years. We have attracted like millions of hryvnias even this year from the IFIs to finance the private sector. We have started to finance the economy of Ukraine on the second week of the war. We have extended 23 billions of hryvnias to the economy of Ukraine, in loans. So I don't know. I mean,
what can the bank's customers expect in 2023, the next 9 months?
It's a difficult question to me, considering the competition. Again, even if and when the supervisory board will change, the supervisory board is only the check and balance instrument, right? It's important that the bank has the team, not only the management team, but also sort of the regular employees of the bank. They survived and sort of continued to work regardless of the events.
Yes.
And I'm sure that the customers and the clients and the Ukraine can expect from this bank that it will sustain and continue to be.
Is there anything else that you would like to mention or say about the situation or the bank? Or
I'm just grateful that I know not a lot of media isn't interested in whatever is going on in Ukreximbank. That's not it has been difficult to attract the attention. It's not
it's not
the
very
fun
sexy,
thing. Yeah, I know. But so I'm thankful that you sort of spent your time. I know that the world is a bit maybe tired of hearing about Ukraine, and I appreciate that, but we still need to talk and to promote Ukraine and whatever values we value here, and thank you.
And share them.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming in. It was a real delight speaking and meeting you today.
Thank you.